ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we are going to have Kavya, who is actually an architect by profession and been in the Web3 space for over 3 years, and now she is building something for the developers. So please put your hands in the air, make some noise, throw your IDs on stage, and welcome Kavya!
Cool. So good morning, everyone. I'm Kavya. I'm going to be talking about Metaverse 101 and, getting you to understand what Metaverse is all about, how it evolved and where we are at right now, the challenges that, we are facing currently and we will probably face in the future as well. It's very hyped up right now, the word Metaverse, but this has been around for a very long time, right? So before I start my talk, let me introduce myself. My name is Kavya. I've been in the blockchain space since 2016. Graduated as an architect, but stopped practicing about a year after. Wasn't my cup of tea, but I think, Metaverse is city planning in the digital world, so I think, I found my calling now. My journey into blockchain started back in 2016 when I was freelancing with a bunch of companies as a product designer, a graphic designer, etc. So yeah, my journey into blockchain started in 2016. I started as a graphic designer and a product designer, wherein I met a couple of blockchain companies at the time that were running publications, ICO companies, and at that point I was essentially helping them with digital presence, community building, etc. And that's how my journey started. Got paid in crypto, and there was no looking back from there. During my stint at Lumos, where we started in 2018, we started as an innovation management company, wherein we were running developer engagement programs for a bunch of, platform companies, L1s, L2s, you name it. We worked with all of them, and we ran hackathons, accelerator programs, that sort of stuff. In the last 4 years, in the journey that I've been through, I've seen a couple of challenges in the developer ecosystem that we thought we could solve through a metaverse, where engaging a developer would be a lot easier and a lot more immersive when we would be able to cater to the entire journey of a dev, as opposed to building one function through a Web2 product. That's how, this Lumos metaverse was incepted. We are essentially building a developer metaverse for essentially collaborating, learning, earning, and building an ecosystem of tech talent for Web3 companies to hire, because hiring is a very, very big problem in this space. Now, the reason I'm telling you about what we're doing is because I want you to understand why metaverses are important and why we should be getting into this, this ecosystem or this technology, right? So to start off with, I want to talk about how metaverses started off, right? So essentially, the word metaverse was coined by an author called Neil Stephenson in a novel called Snow Crash. But if you haven't read the book, you haven't missed much, because that's literally the only thing about metaverses there is. Everything else is a fictional story. It's fun to read, so give it a read when you have the time. But the interesting thing is, VR technology has been around from the 1960s. There was a very interesting cinematographer called Martin Helig, who essentially built a device called Sensoram, who essentially built in malls, you see these 7D, theaters where you have like moving chairs and surround sound. He essentially built this in 1962 called a Sensoram. It's basically a very immersive movie screening device, obviously very chunky from back in the day, but it essentially does everything that a 7D or a movie that does right now in the malls that you see right now. So back in 1960s, he realized that an immersive world is what you should be exploring and going towards, even in the entertainment business, right? But the first VR headset was built by a couple of people from Harvard University. It looks like a very interesting, chunky device and very experimental stuff. But the first VR device was created or invented in 1969, which is, I didn't even think VR was a thing back then. So this is very interesting to know, right? But after which, VR technology kind of like dipped in interest, because there wasn't enough use cases, there wasn't enough, borderless connectivity to be able to actually use this in masses. So it dipped way back until 2010 when the Oculus Rift was created. And, we had the internet, we were able to connect with different people, we were able to talk and, play games and, collaborate with each other in an immersive environment. So that's when, VR came into the picture again back in 2010. So moving on, I think gaming has definitely increased the mass adoption of metaverses and VR technology, mainly because entertainment is where it all began. The Oculus, even the VR headsets, everything was about cinema, movies, games, building a digital presence in through the real world in a way where you could lead a life digitally as well. So here are some very interesting games from back in the day. Sims was actually created in the 1990s, where you could essentially build your own world, your own life, and go to a job, earn money, build a home, create a family. This was the first ever metaverse that I've ever used, right, back in the day. But Second Life was something that was mass adopted. A lot of people started, using Second Life because it was more first person as opposed to third person, while Sims was third person. But after which, I think metaverse games have been, been created in masses, and here are a couple of examples, right? Fortnite, which has also gotten into blockchain technology, Roblox, Sandblocks, all of which are now using cryptocurrencies to incentivize users, etc. So it has grown over the last 30 years. It has grown immensely. This has been a big propellant to the metaverse movement itself. Now, why is there so much hype all of a sudden about metaverses in the last 3 years, right? It all started when Facebook bought Oculus, where Mark Zuckerberg essentially started creating a whole ecosystem like the Android Play Store in the Oculus ecosystem, right? So you have really cool games like Beat Saber, where you can essentially play with another person in another part of the world, and this entertainment movement has really propelled the metaverse sector, but what essentially made this mass adopted, where my mom, all of our parents know what metaverses are, is the pandemic. The pandemic during the lockdown made us so secluded and we were in solitude for so long that we were craving for human connect, right? And we weren't able to meet people in reality. And, chatting, video conferencing, all of that works, but it isn't as good as, actually meeting someone in reality. So the metaverse essentially helped us sort of meet each other in a realistic way, and that is when we saw the adoption of Gather, Gather Town, where even YC runs its demo days. There were a lot of metaverse museums where you can essentially go around and watch, Spatial being one of them, and of course, then the rebrand of Facebook to Meta, which essentially, brought about this craze about metaverses and what's to come, right? Because social media, as good as it is right now, will definitely be an upgrade when it is in a 3D environment. And of course, the connect of Web3 or blockchain into metaverses has made made metaverses a lot more useful over and above gaming and entertainment. Now we can start earning, now we can start learning, now we can start looking at data privacy and protection. All of that was what Web3 essentially propelled. So these 4 things has essentially made metaverses the next big thing and the future of the internet. Moving on to why a metaverse, right? Because most people, when I talk to them about what I'm building, they're like, whatever we're doing in the 2D world works out. I mean, we don't need it, right? But as humans, we always look for evolution. We always look for the next best thing. What is better than what we have? Why did we move from Web 1 to Web 2 to Web 3, right? We always want an upgrade and we always want to get to the next level. That's where, metaverses sort of came into the picture, where we have, a lot of use cases and some of them being, connecting with people and negating physical distance in the best way possible, where you don't have to really, travel across the world to meet someone in a realistic manner, right? An immersive experience. I mean, who doesn't want that, right? Better social interactions, upgrade in social media, new business opportunities. E-commerce platforms are looking at digital twins online, where you can essentially go into a store sitting at your home and you don't really have to go to a mall to check it out, right? Improvements in online learning and education. There are a lot of use cases in healthcare, in the defense, where metaverses are used to essentially pilot certain or create certain environments that are hard to create in the real world, right? It would be very cost intensive, and this is a lot more efficient and realistic. New opportunities for financial gain, where you essentially get to earn, get to flip, metaverse land, get to flip NFTs that you earn in the metaverse, and there are a lot of opportunities for you to essentially earn in the world. Improvements in work environment, as I mentioned, the pandemic essentially made us work from home, and again, video conferencing works, but if I were to be able to meet someone more realistically, why wouldn't I, right? And of course, gaming. I don't think I need to talk more about gaming because I think that is the biggest driver of the metaverse. Now, with all of this happening, there are obviously challenges to the metaverse as well. Some of them, namely being hardware. We are definitely not there yet in terms of hardware. The Oculus or the headsets that you get outside right now are super chunky, not economical. Not everyone can have it. So if I were to build a metaverse that was only available on VR headsets, I'd be cutting down more than half of my audience set that I could actually go after. So we need to look at more sleek devices, more economical devices that can be mass-produced and actually shared with the masses. This is definitely in the works and it's coming in the next 10 years, but we are a little far away from that, and which is why 2D metaverses in your computers or in your iPads or your phones are what is now propelled, because in terms of technology, we are there right now, and we will be moving towards a more immersive environment very soon. Identities. Now in the metaverse, identities are a lot more real, right? You're not just giving your password and your email ID. You're giving your entire look and feel, who you are as a person, which creates a lot of security concerns. So you should be looking at identity is a big challenge. How do you verify identities? How do you avoid bots from coming in and impersonating you? How do you, avoid spam accounts coming in? Blocking is one thing, but then we need to look at a more robust solution to actually avoid these sort of malpractices that can happen, right? And we've seen that in social media cybercrime. This is just going to be 10 times worse. Privacy and data security. As I mentioned, we're giving everything from our retina to our, hand gestures to our, our fingerprints essentially in the metaverse eventually, right? How do we secure that data? How do we make that private? And how do we own that? There needs to be better security strategies for something like that. And this is something that needs to be worked on as well. In terms of ownership as well, because everything is so borderless, we own land in the metaverse, but there is no law jurisdiction around ownership and how you actually manage, your assets in the metaverse. So that's something that needs to be looked into as well. And I do know some lawyers that are working towards this, but it isn't there yet. Third part, currency and digital payments. Because you're earning in the metaverse, you're supposed to be getting money through this immersive environment. We need to be looking at better security strategies. We should be looking at faster TPS. But we're not looking at, we're not there yet even in in the Web 2 world. So we are pretty far away from that in the metaverse realm, right? And of course, this is something of concern, and this has been there from the inception of social media, I guess, which is addiction and mental health. But in social media, again, you are in a 2D world. It's not as immersive, but the moment it becomes more immersive, you're going to want to stay there longer. This causes dire health issues, and you're essentially looking at the screen 24/7, which is not good for you. How do we solve that, right? Law and jurisdiction in general. There is going to be a lot of cybercrime, cyberbullying, a lot of impersonation in the metaverse, but this is borderless. So you can't be looking at region-wise jurisdiction. It'll have to be a law and jurisdiction or legislation for in the metaverse itself, right? So that is something that needs to be sorted out as well. And one of the biggest problem is digital equity. Even though we say, we are there and we are, the digital realm is growing, a lot of people don't have access to the internet. We are in tier 1 cities and we're able to access the internet on the go wherever we want, but not everyone has that luxury of doing so. Not everyone has the luxury of buying a VR headset. No, not everyone has a hardware that can actually render hyper-realistic metaverse in their laptops or their devices. So how do we solve for digital equity? We're not going to be mass adopting a technology that is so high on processing power without having this available equally to everybody, right? So these are some challenges. A lot of people are working on it, but we are far along from, getting to a place where metaverse becomes the next, internet, where you are searching for, instead of searching for websites, you're searching for different metaverses to go into. We're not there yet, right? We're at least about 15 years away from that. Now, with that being said, we aren't, there are challenges, but there are a lot of technological advancements there as well. So here are a couple of interesting technologies that have propelled metaverses and made it happen to the way it is right now, at least, right? One of them being virtual streaming. We saw this back in the day when, Zoom came in and started these webinars, and we could essentially join in real time and listen to a person talking online, right? You didn't have to be physically present, or it isn't a pre-recorded session. This has definitely made metaverses a more immersive environment, where when you're talking to an avatar and you want to see who the real person is, you would be able to see them through virtual streaming, right? Machine intelligence, of course, AI, machine learning, all of this has definitely had a huge impact in metaverses, where you can essentially, an example of a very interesting use case of AI in metaverses is Hyperreal. It's a very, very cool company that essentially uses a device that records every movement, every hand gesture that you make, and essentially mimics or reflects it in a 3D world or in a metaverse, where a lot of people, essentially have metaverse concerts, like what Snoop Dogg did in Fortnite, etc. All of this happens only when you are able to mimic them exactly the same way they look in real life, right? It doesn't feel the same way otherwise. So AI has essentially made that happen for us. In the future, I also see a lot of, a more realistic and even closer to the real world mimic in the virtual world through AI and machine intelligence. Now, distributed networks. So with 5G, the 5th generation of the internet, we've been able to, get to a level where we can render metaverses to a certain extent, right? But this is not going to be enough. We do need a more robust internet ecosystem, and I do think that distributed computing will essentially make that happen. When we distribute the compute and the bandwidth of internet and be able to get to the next generation of the internet, we would be able to render imagery way quicker than we can right now. And this is in the works, obviously, with Web3. But again, we aren't there yet, but this is moving towards that ecosystem. Open platforms. Open source has been, moving the internet to where it is right now ever since the inception, right? This is a huge community of engineers who tend to work together to build innovations for the world. Now, with open source, we've been able to create languages like, WebGL. We've been able to create languages like 3JS that essentially make metaverses happen right now. That apart, of course, everything that the internet has happened because of this open source community, which has played a very vital role. That apart, low-code platforms. So Shopify is a very good example of a low-code or a no-code platform, right? Where any non-developer would be able to host an e-commerce site without having to actually build it out from scratch or hire a developer. This, again, obviously, the backbone of it is developers are building everything, but this scales the way we can move forward, right? Scalability, communities, and everything increases in terms of no-code platforms, and that adoption is immense. So think of every store in the real world essentially building a metaverse store, right? Where you can essentially enter, look at clothes, probably eventually even feel it through, haptic feel, and be able to buy clothes the way you would buy in the real world, right? Simulating reality is a very, very interesting concept. So back in the day, every 3D game has been done through shader programming, right? So shader programming essentially simulates whatever is in reality in the 3D world in real time. Now, it isn't as hyper-realistic as you would expect, But very, very recently, we have new technologies that are being built that essentially help us build hyper-realistic metaverses in real time by essentially we had shader programming, which got real-time rendering on 3D worlds, but it wasn't as hyper-realistic, right? But very recently, there has been new technology that was created that essentially helps you create hyper-realistic environments, but it would be pre-recorded. So in movies, you essentially see ray tracing that goes through physics of light and how protons react to reflecting on different materials and be able to create a very, very realistic effect. So what you see in movies is what ray tracing does, but we haven't gotten to real-time ray tracing. So imagine real-time ray tracing in the metaverse, right? You would actually be able to see all of what you see right now in a very, very realistic way. Of course, blockchain adoption, I'm not even going to talk about it. This is the Web3 conference, but blockchain adoption has been a very, very pivotal technology in the adoption of metaverses, where you're making metaverses interoperable. You're looking at data security. You're looking at privacy. You're looking at decentralization, and even creating a financial economy within metaverses, where you can buy, sell assets within the world in a way where that finance can be used in different metaverses. Cybernetics is super interesting. This is when the human sensory and movements are actually captured in computers. So imagine metaverses where you could actually touch another person and feel what they feel, right? Shake hands with them in a realistic way. That is what cybernetic essentially does. And we're already exploring this, and researchers are building more research papers on how we can essentially make that happen. But we're going to essentially get there, where we will be able to feel another person and hug them in the virtual world. So that's essentially it. I mean, we are, the reason I wanted to do this talk is because we're building a metaverse, and I wanted everyone to know how metaverses are the future of the internet, and we are looking at building this from a 2D environment all the way up to a VR environment, but we aren't there yet, and this is where we are right now. But if there were not enough people building this, we will not be able to get to the next level, and we're looking at getting to that next level by one step at a time, by building a 2D world all the way up to a 3D world. Either way, if you guys want to geek out about metaverses, Web3, education, developer engagement opportunities, do join us on Discord, and we can talk and have fun. We have a great community. Thank you.